in Boots. Once upon a time there lived a poor miller who had 3 sons. When he died, all he owned was distributed among his sons. The eldest had the mill. The second had the donkey. And the youngest son had the miller's cat. The boy was very fond of the cat, but he could not see how the cat could ever make him rich. As he gently petted the cat, she said, "Don't worry, master. If you do what I tell you, you will see how much I can do for you. First, get me a large bag and a pair of boots." The youngest son of the miller took some of the money he had and bought a large bag and a fine pair of yellow-colored boots. The cat put on her new pair of boots and at once went out into the garden. This was Puss in Boots. She picked up some carrots from the garden and put them in the bag. Then she went off across the fields until she found a rabbit hole. She put the bag down with its mouth wide open so that the carrot could be seen. Then she hid herself behind a low hedge. Soon a fat grey rabbit came out of the hole. He smelled the fresh carrots and jumped into the bag to eat them. Puss in Boots immediately jumped from behind the hedge and quickly tied a string around the bag. The fat rabbit was caught. Then Puss, wearing her yellow boots, carried the bag on her shoulder and came to the king's palace. She bowed before the king and said, "Your Majesty, I have brought you a fat rabbit from the estate of my master, the Prince of Carabas." The king was surprised to see the yellow boots. But he did not show his surprise. He accepted the gift. The next day, Puss put a handful of grain into her bag and went out into the fields. She put the bag on the ground and lay down beside it, pretending to be dead. Two parrots came and started to eat the grain. Puss in Boots waited for the right moment and quickly tied a string around the bag, catching both the parrots inside. Once more, she set off for the palace and presented herself before the king. "My master, the Prince of Carabas, begs you to accept these 2 parrots," said Puss in Boots, bowing with respect. "Tell your master," said the king, "I am pleased to accept his gift. He must have a fine castle." "Oh yes, it is very fine," said Puss, bowing before the king before leaving him. As she went through the halls in the palace, she heard that the king and his daughter were going to drive beside the river that afternoon. Puss raced home to his master and told him about her visit to the king's palace. She then said to him, "I want you to go and swim in the river. If anyone asks your name, say that you are the Prince of Carabas. The miller's son left Puss in Boots to guard his boots. And went to swim in the river. Puss carefully hid his master's clothes under a pile of stones and waited for the royal carriage. As the carriage came near, Puss ran in front of it, shouting, "Help, help! The Prince of Carabas is drowning!" The king stopped the carriage and ordered his servants to rescue the prince. Then Puss went up to the carriage with her hat in her hand. She bowed before the king and the princess and said, "We are indeed so grateful that you passed by, but alas, a thief has stolen my master's clothes." The king sent a servant to the palace to get a suit. When the miller's son put it on, he looked just like a prince. "This is my master, the Prince of Carabas," said Puss to the king and the princess, as she graciously introduced herself to the miller's son. "We hope you will drive on and dine with the prince." "It will be a pleasure," replied the king, and he invited the prince to ride in his carriage. Puss ran across the fields ahead of the carriage. When she met some haymakers, she warned them, "When the king passes this way and inquires to whom this field belongs, you have to say, 'To the Prince of Carabas, your majesty.' If you don't say so, you will be cut into little pieces." Now, the land actually belonged to a terrible giant. All the people were afraid of him. But Puss walked boldly into his castle. "I've heard that you can turn yourself into any animal you wish. Is that true?" asked Puss calmly. "Oh, yes, of course," said the giant, full of pride. In a flash, he became a roaring lion. Though Puss was terrified at the sight of a big lion, she continued bravely, "It truly is amazing that you can become a big lion. But surely it would be difficult for you to change into a tiny creature such as a mouse." The giant said, "Oh no, it is no problem at all." In an instant, he became a tiny mouse. Puss sprang upon the tiny mouse and with one shake killed it. Thus, the giant who became a tiny mouse died. At that very moment, the king's carriage came near the castle. "You have a large estate and a fine castle," said the king to the miller's son. The king was told by the haymakers that the fields belonged to the Prince of Carabas. The king, the princess, the miller's son, and Puss went inside the castle and sat down to a grand feast. "This young man would become a good husband for my daughter," thought the king, and he turned to the miller's son, saying, "Will you marry my daughter?" The miller's son and the princess fell in love with each other. they got married and lived happily in the giant's castle. Puss in Boots lived in comfort for the rest of her days, and she never had to hunt again.
Cinderella. Once upon a time, a rich man's wife died. So he decided to marry again, so that his lonely daughter would have a mother to care for her. But the woman he chose to marry was a proud and selfish woman with 2 daughters just like herself. She did not show her true character until after the wedding. She ordered her daughter to work in the kitchen while she and her daughters enjoyed themselves. When the child had done her work, she used to sit in the chimney corner among the cinders or the ash. So everyone called her Cinderella. Her clothes were dirty and torn, yet she was far prettier than her sisters. One day the king invited them for a party. The sisters were very happy. They kept on talking what they would wear and ordered beautiful gowns. Cinderella also wanted to go, but her sisters teased her and said, "Would you not like to dress up in fine clothes and ride in a carriage, dance with a rich young man, or maybe even with the prince himself?" It was known that the prince was in search of a wife, and Cinderella's stepmother had high hopes for her daughters. Soon the great day arrived. Cinderella was busy all day, dressing her sisters and combing their hair, and when the beautiful carriage arrived to take them to the ball, she arranged their dress so that they would not get shapeless on the way. When the sisters had left, Cinderella began to cry. Suddenly, her fairy grandmother appeared and said, "Why are you crying, my dear?" "I wish I could go to the party," cried Cinderella. Her fairy grandmother told her that she would go. She told Cinderella to get her a pumpkin. Cinderella was puzzled, but she quickly brought the largest pumpkin that she could find. Her fairy grandmother waved her magic wand and turned the pumpkin into a beautiful golden carriage. Cinderella was then sent to find 6 mice, a rat, and 6 lizards. The fairy grandmother turned the 6 mice into smart grey horses, the rat into a handsome coachman, and the 6 lizards into smart footmen. Then She waved her magic wand over Cinderella, and soon her dirty dress became the most beautiful dress ever seen. Cinderella also saw that her feet were a beautiful pair of golden slippers. The fairy grandmother now told Cinderella to go immediately and leave the palace before the clock struck 12, as the magic would end at midnight. When Cinderella appeared in the dance room, everyone became silent, and the music and dancing stopped. She was the most beautiful young woman in that room. The young prince took her hand and led her to the dance floor. He danced with no one else but her the whole evening. When they sat down for their dinner, the prince could hardly eat anything as he was so busy looking at her. The dance went on. Cinderella was very happy. She danced every dance and did not at all feel tired. Then she heard a clock striking the hour. She thought it must be midnight. She became afraid and ran away from the dance room. The prince tried to catch up with Cinderella. As she ran towards the golden carriage in her hurry, she lost one of her lovely golden slippers. As the prince bent down to pick up the golden slipper, the clock struck 12. When the prince stood up, he saw that his beautiful dance partner, her fine coach, and the horses were missing. Now the prince was in no mood to celebrate, and all the guests were told to leave. The prince took the golden slippers to the king and told him that he wanted to find the beautiful maiden whose foot the slipper fitted. When he found her, he will marry her. The prince now went to every house in the entire kingdom to look for Cinderella. Cinderella's stepmother grew very excited when the prince arrived at their house. she was shown the golden slipper. She told her daughters to try to put on the slipper. But they could not do so, as they had big, clumsy feet, and the golden slipper was tiny and delicate. The prince asked her if there was any other young woman in that house. The stepmother replied that only Cinderella was there, and she worked in the kitchen and did not go to the party. The prince ordered the stepmother to bring Cinderella there. When Cinderella put on the slipper, it fit her pretty foot. The prince had now found the girl he wanted to marry. He took Cinderella along with him to his palace and married her there. Thus they lived happily ever after.
Rookie of the Clump. Once upon a time, a queen gave birth to a son. He was very ugly. The queen was saddened by his ugliness. But a kind fairy promised her that her son would be very clever. He would also be able to gift his wisdom to the person he truly loved. Now, this little prince had a clump of hair on his forehead, so he was known as Rookie of the Clump. Rookie grew up to be a fine young lad, and everyone could see that the fairy had been right about the boy's intelligence. When the prince spoke, he charmed everyone. He surprised them with his wit and intelligence. 7 years later, a neighboring queen gave birth to twin daughters. The first one was very beautiful. She was, however, declared stupid and foolish by the fairy. The queen became sad on hearing this. The second princess was born very ugly. The fairy told the queen, "Do not be sad. Your second daughter will be very clever. No one will notice her ugliness." The queen thanked the fairy. She asked her if there was any way by which her beautiful daughter could also become wise. The fairy just sighed. There was nothing she could do. She told the queen that her beautiful daughter would be able to give the gift of beauty to the person who pleased her most. The two princesses grew up. The beautiful princess surprised everyone with her beauty. The ugly one was so clever that she surprised everyone with her intelligence. Just as the fairy had said, the beautiful princess was stupid. She barely spoke anything sensible. The ugly princess grew uglier day by day. But she gathered many admirers because of her intelligence and charm. At the same time, the beautiful princess was very sad. Nobody wanted to talk to her. She wanted to give up all her beauty. She desired to have even half of her sister's intelligence. One day, sad and lonely, she went to the forest to think about her bad fortune. At that moment, there stood before her a very ugly but well-dressed man. He was Ricky of the Clump. Ricky had heard of the princess's beauty. He had left his kingdom to look for her. He asked, "Why are you sad?" The princess replied, "I am sad because I am very stupid." Ricky replied that he could help her. He said, "I have the power to give good sense and intelligence to the person I love. I shall give you these qualities, but you have to promise to marry me after 1 year." The princess wanted very much to be intelligent, so she promised him that she would marry him after a year. The princess felt a great change come over her. She did not find any difficulty in talking sense. Now she was able to speak clever words. She found that she could now talk easily. She was able to discuss any subject that she liked. People in the palace saw the change in her. They were happy to see her so wise, intelligent, and clever. The king, her father, also called her to important meetings in the palace. He also took her advice. Now that the princess was intelligent, clever, and so very beautiful, she received many offers of marriage. There was one handsome and powerful prince she liked. Her father told her that she could choose him as a husband. The princess once again decided to take a walk in the forest to think about her future. While the princess was walking in the forest and thinking deeply, she saw several men preparing for a huge feast. There was a long table laid out. Everyone was busy. They were preparing a large number of dishes. She asked them what they were doing. One of them replied, "We are preparing a wedding feast. It is the wedding of Ricky of the Clump. He is getting married tomorrow." In a flash, the princess remembered her promise, and the very next moment, what did she see? Ricky standing before her. He had a happy glow on his ugly face. He thanked her for keeping her promise. He told her about the wedding arrangements. He told her that he had made these arrangements for their wedding. The princess was very confused and did not know what to say. She stammered and said that she was not at all sure that she wanted to get married to him. Ricky understood her. He explained to her that she could grant beauty to the person she loved. He also explained that she could do it in the same way that he had given her intelligence, because he loved her. When the princess thought about Ricky, she realized that she loved Ricky because of his good qualities. She was only doubtful about getting married to him because he was so ugly. Then the princess looked deep into Ricky's eyes. She said, "I wish for you to become the most handsome prince in the whole world." As soon as the princess made her wish, Ricky changed. He appeared before her handsome and graceful. The princess smiled. She was happy now. They got married the very next day and lived happily ever after. The Nightingale. A long time ago, there lived in China a little nightingale who sang beautifully. Since the emperor and his royal courtiers lived in a palace, they did not know anything about the nightingale and its singing. The palace was surrounded by a green forest where the nightingale lived. This nightingale was declared as one of the great marvels of China by writers who wrote the history of China. One day, the Emperor of China happened to read one such history book. The Emperor exclaimed, "Oh! What is this?" "I have no knowledge about such a nightingale in my empire. Why has no one told me about it?" His courtiers said, "We have never heard of it." The emperor said, "It must be brought to my court this evening. If you are not able to do this, then the whole court will be punished." The courtiers, scared on hearing this royal command, quickly went to find the bird. They found a kitchen boy who had heard the nightingale singing. The kitchen boy took the courtiers to the nightingale. It agreed to go with them to the palace. The emperor was happy to hear the nightingale's song, and the courtiers heaved a sigh of relief. The emperor decided to keep it in his palace. He put the nightingale into a golden cage and appointed 12 servants to look after it. The nightingale sang every day, and everyone in China marveled at its beautiful voice. But the nightingale was unhappy. It did not like living in the cage and wanted to go back to the forest, free to live and sing as it chose. One day, the Emperor of China received a golden casket with a gem-studded work of art inside it as a gift from the Emperor of Japan. The Emperor was happy to see the gift. It was a clockwork toy nightingale which sang the same song again and again when wound up. Soon the whole court was busy playing with the toy bird, and the real nightingale quietly flew back to its home in the forest. It was only after a while that the courtiers found the real nightingale missing from the palace. After this, they placed the toy bird on a silk cushion beside the emperor's bed. The bird sang the same tune many times in a day. One day, a strange incident took place. Some problem arose in the toy bird and it stopped working. Everyone was summoned, including the royal physician, the royal watchmaker, and even the lord of the royal bedchamber. But none of them was able to diagnose the problem. When the toy bird stopped singing, the emperor took to his bed. He fell ill, and everybody feared that he might die soon. There was silence all around the palace, so that the emperor would not be disturbed. Soon the real nightingale came to know about the emperor's condition. One night, it came to the window of the emperor's room and sang the sweetest song it had ever sung. As soon as the emperor heard it, he got up from his bed. The next morning, the emperor was fit and happy. And everyone was surprised to see him so. The emperor asked the nightingale to sing according to its wish. The nightingale agreed and asked him to keep its nightly visits a secret. Shh! This the emperor gladly did.